Okay, I'm here this morning with Patti McGillivray. She's an OT of more than 20 years experience and owner of OT for Kids in St. Catharines. She actually has a whole team of talented OTs that work to support families of infants and young children. Well, not just young children, children all the way up to the teen years. They focus on self-regulation, gross motor and fine motor development, social and emotional development, and sensory processing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So good morning, Patti. Thank you for talking with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Have I missed anything?
No. I think that was very well said. Thank you.
Terrific, terrific. So I wanted to start by asking you, why are the senses that we have important for infant and child development?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think of that, I think of all the sensation that infants receive and how crucial it is for their development. And why? Because the brain grows in response to experiences. So all the sensation that they receive in that experience literally helps to build the neural pathways or the connections to the different parts of the brain. So when we look at sensation, sensation is what helps to build that circuitry into an increasingly more complex brain. So first and foremost, it grows the brain. It also helps the child develop an understanding of himself, his environment. So, that's mom's voice. And I hear her coming. And how he's moving and interacting with his environment. And finally, sensation supports all areas of development. And it provides the foundation for everything we do, whether we're infant, toddler, adolescent, adult, everything we do, every experience is first a sensory experience.
It's amazing, isn't it? It all starts with
So
those senses.
amazing.
Well, and I have to, as an aside, say, I love talking about sensory processing, and I especially love talking to OTs, and I know I'm a little biased there, but this is really nice to get a chance to do this. Now, I know for most people, the basic senses that they think about are seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching, but there's more than those five.
Yeah, absolutely. We have three less familiar senses that are crucial for our development and our brain development. So the sensation that we receive through our inner ears is called the vestibular system. It tells us how and where we're moving in space. It also impacts our postural tone so that we can move up against gravity, which as an infant is really important as they learn all those motor skills. It develops our sense of balance. It alerts or it soothes the body, thereby changing our level of alertness, and it helps us use our eyes in a coordinated manner, just kind of to name a few. Our proprioception is the sensory information that we get from our muscles and joints. So if I move my arm, it tells me how far I'm moving, the amount of force that I'm exerting, and the heaviness of objects. And we just recently moved, and I have to tell you, I currently right now am relying a lot on proprioception as I learn where the light switches are in the dark, because I'm really relying heavily on my proprioceptive input. So proprioception, the sensation we get through proprioception together with touch, helps develop that internal map of self within the brain. So if you think of the brain doesn't know that we have arms and hands and legs and a mouth. So the sensation that we get through proprioception actually develops an internal schema called body schema that helps the brain understand or actually have an awareness of the body. And that's really important because you need that schema to better understand how we're moving in space. Proprioception, when we look at regulation, together with sensory processing, is a really game changer in calming the nervous system. And we really highlight this for parents so that they can help their child soothe during times of stress or soothe when they have to calm to go down to sleep, whether it be nap or bedtime. So proprioceptive system is a really big one for supporting that regulation. And then the last one is interoception. And basically that is the information that we get from inside our body. So it helps us understand how we're feeling inside. So the information from our organs, from our stomach, from our bowels, that help us understand whether we're hungry or whether we need to go to the bathroom. And this information or body of information is becoming a lot more prevalent within the sciences and helping us understand that interaction with development and awareness of our bodies. So pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and it makes you realize too, or points out just how developmental the sensory systems are, that there's a reason that, 5-year-olds can use, are ready for using the toilet, but a 1-year-old is not.
Absolutely.
It's a developmental process, which is, and that applies to all the senses, of course, but the interoception one is probably the least known of all of them. Now, when senses are developing smoothly, we almost don't notice the process happening. But what happens when that processing isn't going smoothly?
Yeah, maybe what if it's all right with you, maybe I'll just highlight how important it is, because then it'll be able to relate it back to when it's not working, you'll be able to see these kinds of things. Is that okay?
That's great.
So when we look at the importance of it all, functionally, so very skill specifically, because I think that will help parents then say, oh, okay, yes, that's not really working well for my child at this time. Definitely, it first and foremost develops the brain, develops the skills across all domains, impacts all areas of function. So how they learn to move, communicate, play, feed themselves, interact with others, learn and perceive the world. So when I think of infants, I immediately think of how crucial that sensation is for the emotional bonding with the infant and the parent, and how important that bond is for supporting the regulation and the social emotional development of that infant. It gives that sense of body scheme that we talked about, the body awareness, that interoception. It helps them understand as they manipulate objects, what objects, the properties of objects, what objects can do for them and what they can do with objects. So thinking of infancy, and this goes across the span of life, but think of infancy when they first learn, if I drop an object from my high chair, that interaction that sort of stimulates is great, right? Because they're learning about the objects and what they could do with that object to get that interaction. So that's really cool. It influences muscle tone, motor control, and balance, so they can learn to move safely in their environment. So when things aren't going well, you're going to see some challenges in those areas. It develops their ability to create, to plan, to organize and sequence those movements so they can learn new motor skills. And we see this really early as the infants learn to crawl and roll and navigate under furniture. And I love watching babies learn to roll, because you can see them literally thinking, where do I put my foot? Okay, that didn't work. And they move their foot into a different spot and they push maybe in a different amount of force. And then all of a sudden they're able to get from their back onto their stomach. That's that motor learning or praxis, that all those skills that they get through sensation allows them to achieve. And we see it even more when you move into toddlers or early childhood, where they're learning really high, complex new motor skills. So for example, jumping, galloping, riding a tricycle. So when things aren't going smoothly, you're going to see some implications there. As infants spatially navigate through space, they're gathering all this information through their senses that supports the development of their visual perceptual skills. So what that really means, and there's lots of perceptual skills, but where they are in relation to the high chair, for example, and where the high chair legs and the orientation of those high chair legs are, so they can get through the high chair and maybe escape from mom. Or finding the remote, which they shouldn't have, because mama said no, in amongst all the toys that they are trying to sift through. And those skills are really important that they get through sensation for reading, for writing, for math. And we don't think of those skills early in infancy, but those skills are so crucial, and they develop through movement that then support later developmental skills or academic growth. What else? It helps them learn to make sounds, interpret sounds, and eventually learn to communicate. And lastly, as I said, it affects that social emotional development and their ability to co-regulate and eventually regulate on their own, which affects their alertness, their focus, and their emotional well-being. And that's where we focus a lot on with our clients.
Yeah, well, it just, I mean, sensory processing and all the sensors and how they work together is just absolutely incredible to me, especially when, as parents, parents tend to focus on the big milestones that they see, right? Are they crawling? Are they walking? Are they using words? And yet the foundation of all that is whether the senses are being processed and helping them to gain those skills in the first place.
Absolutely. And these are crucial years because the brain is developing so rapidly with those neural connections, which is really, really important.
Well, and I wonder, I know we were going to talk a little bit about the red flags, but it seems an appropriate jumping off point to talk about these early years and what parents could do to support sensory development first.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm talking off my top of my head now, really thinking about how they're moving, for example. So I would encourage them, and I say this for many reasons, but get them down on the floor and crawl, crawl, crawl. Have them chase you, you chase them, move in and out of different furniture, over pillows. So all that sensation through touch, through proprioception, through the vestibular system helps them understand their body, okay? Lots and lots of sensation, whether it be through cuddles, whether it be through exploratory play, like, you know, even like as they get older, or even before they get older, crinkle paper, like bows, putting in bows in a Tupperware container and having them feel different textures. And right now there's so many toys out there that are textured based, which is great because it provides lots of sensation, but there's lots that parents can do at home to build in sensory experiences. Even like I'm thinking bubbles, putting bubbles, and we'll do it a lot, on the table and allowing them to kind of feel it, interact with it, their food. And I say this often with parents, put like their food on their table, allow them to muck in it, allow them, get engrossed in it, because that tactile experience is allowing those sensations to develop the brain.
Right. And it speaks to this idea that it doesn't have to, I mean, the process that's going on is complicated, but in terms of setting up an environment that supports that, it can be very simple if we're aware of what the opportunities are.
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, getting down on the ground and playing with your child. Doing lots of movement, lots, if you think of the touch, talking to them, you know, moving, all of those kinds of things. So if you think of the sensory system or the sensory systems, think of how you can stimulate those in a way that it's fun, in a way that the child feels safe and not overwhelmed. Yeah, enjoy it.
Yeah, it really is through play, isn't it? It all emerges through that, that play. That's wonderful. Now, what would parents do, or what red flags might they see if that process of developing the senses and sensory processing isn't going smoothly?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think if you're seeing the pathways or the processing isn't going smoothly, the infant, child, young child, toddler, doesn't matter, you will start to see difficulty modulating the amount of sensory information. So there might be too much or too little sensation, such that the stimulation is overwhelming and or even painful. Or maybe the infant, the sensation is insufficient, so the infant isn't responding in ways that you would expect. So you might see that they're not responding to the stimulation around them. They don't express pain or discomfort. And I see this a lot where the toddler will fall and they'll say, wow, that really should have hurt. And they get up and off they go again. To me, that's a red flag that they did not even process. The brain didn't receive that information to the same extent that it should have. They might appear more lethargic, or conversely, they might seek lots of movement. They might be constantly on the go. And I mean, toddlers are on the go, but more so than usual. They might have a poor sense of safety. So a lot of the kids we see, they're climbing way up on shelves, they're on bookcases, and they don't really have an understanding that that's not safe. They don't even understand how they got there. They're just there. So that kind of awareness of their body and their environment may be insufficient. Other areas you might see is that the brain might have difficulty discriminating the details of that sensory input. So they don't understand, or the brain doesn't understand what that sensation means. So the child's motor response or behavioral response may be inaccurate or disorganized. So motorically, they might frequently fall, or they might appear uncoordinated, or their motor development isn't really progressing as expected. And I think that's where parents are really attuned to, because they are looking at those developmental milestones. One of the things that they might not be as cognizant of is their child's ability to learn how to interact and play with toys. Even when they've sat down and demonstrated and modeled, that they're not really seeming to initiate that play. They kind of enjoy being there with the parent and seeing and kind of watching, but don't really initiate that interaction. Conversely, if the sensation is overwhelming, you might see the child become really overstimulated or uncomfortable in response to that sensation. So where we see it a lot is if they go to a family function or noisy environment. We see it where kids don't like to be hugged, or they have a hard time keeping clothes on, and maybe washing their hair or bathing time is really horrific. And when I talk here, it's the emotional response that's really intense. So all kids hate getting their face washed, as they're developing early, but I'm talking an emotional, intense behavioral response, right? So when you talk of that, where they go into sort of a meltdown, it's more than your terrible twos. It's having so much difficulty consoling that child that it's almost into a stress response that child moves into. Difficulty settling at night, which I know you speak a lot to. Even if the parents have a great hygiene program in place in terms of their evening routine, or supporting that co-regulation, the child has a really hard time settling, or they settle for a bit and then they're up frequently through the night. So yes, those are some of the red flags that, as a clinician, when the parents are sharing their information, that kind of highlights to me that there may be some difficulties with the sensory processing, and that connection or understanding to be able to reciprocate an appropriate response is not working as smoothly as perhaps what it could or should be.
Right. Well, and it may be worth mentioning as well that even for adults, where sensory processing is generally working well, when we're stressed, nothing goes as smoothly. Sensory processing is a little bit more work, or we have a little bit harder of a time tuning out noise. I say that as my kids are chatting and running around in the background today, and I'm having trouble tuning them out. But when kids have are settled into a predictable routine that they're comfortable with, they may thrive. But then in a new situation, all that sensory input throws them off because they haven't quite figured out how to integrate that well.
Absolutely. Stress really impacts brain function. I always say when we're in high levels of stress, our cortical cortex turns off. So it's not
Yeah.
working quite as efficiently to help us be able to organize our thinking, to be able to organize and interpret the sensation that and I say organize our thinking, it's subconsciously, right? Be able to interpret that sensation for the brain to be able to say, okay, this is how you're going to respond to this. So absolutely.
Which highlights another point that you made around co-regulation and the importance of co-regulation in allowing that baby to use our sensory integration and our calm nervous system to bring things down to a manageable level.
Absolutely. One of the cool things that we share with parents is that the infants at a really early stage understand or pick up the nonverbal cues of parents. So if parents are elevated or stressed, the child will see it in their face, in their eyes, in their face, in their mouth, in their tone of voice, so it's not really much what the parent says, but how they say it. Are their bodies calm? Is the intonation sort of calm and even? Is there some pauses in between what they're saying? And that is really what supports that co-regulation. And infants pick it up early, like
It's
6 months,
amazing, isn't
5
it?
months. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible, incredible. Where I'll finish off because I know we're almost out of time. Where can families learn more if they're curious about learning more about sensory processing, or if they're concerned and want to find out more?
Absolutely. Well, definitely our website, www.otforkids.ca. We are in the process of revamping it, so some of the information might not all be there just yet. Give me a week and it will be there. One of my favorite websites that I share with families is the STAR Institute. So that is www.spdstar.org. Another website that we use frequently, again, is very parent friendly, helps parents understand sensory processing and, when things aren't going as smoothly, is Understood. So that's www.understood.org. So those are really good parent friendly websites that we share with our families.
Great. And I've been on the spdstar.org website. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Patti, I want to thank you for spending this time with me and talking about this. I love this topic, and I love connecting with OTs. Is there anything I haven't asked that you wanted to finish off with today?
I don't think so. I think just really my rule of thumb, if parents are concerned and they're not sure, reach out. But sort of the indicator is when the child's response to the sensation, which is frequently seen in their behavior, interferes with their ability to participate in their everyday activities. So if you're seeing an isolated kind of like, oh, Patti talked about this, I need to get help. No, it's kind of like when it's really interfering with their ability to participate in activities. So whether it be feeding or sleeping or play or going and visiting family, or when it's really compromising their child's safety, that's when I'd reach out and talk to their family physician and their sort of support network on where to get help.
Terrific. That's super helpful. That's great.
Thank you.
So Patti, thank you again. It's been a real pleasure to get to spend this time with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Heather. This has been delightful. Thank you.
Great. Bye for now.
Take care.